silent era, there was a lot of film production in Chicago, which that's where the coin phrase came from. Chicago was the film capital at the time.
Before World War I, the S&A Film Corporation had a major studio operation here, and Charlie Chaplin worked, 23 days in Chicago only before he went to California. But he shot a film here.
The John Hughes 16 Candles, which was shot in Chicago. I remember the Blues Brothers, when it came out, it was like the be-all, end-all, and I got to see that in movies.
What we see in those movies that is Chicago doesn't really look like our city anymore, and it's become kind of this great, valuable time capsule of what the city used to look like. It's also a great reminder of things like the Blues Brothers, especially where they are tearing up downtown in this car chase, that it's just great behind-the-scenes history with that, because the elder Mayor Daley never would have allowed that movie to be shot here. But then Jane Byrne comes along and says, "Fine, you can tear up Daley Plaza if you like. Just clean it up afterwards." And that's kind of the great thing about that car chase.
Risky business was like the thing when it first came out, and I remember hearing a story about Tom Cruise going to the audition, and from my teacher, actually. It wasn't Bad Boys, it was Tom Cruise, and he auditioned, and the producers didn't really care for him much, and then my mentor was there, and he actually put in a good word for Tom Cruise, and like 2 days later he actually got the part. So that was a cute story.
Transformer film that really took a lot of weeks and closed a lot of streets in Chicago. That's interesting to see your skyline up there on the big screen, but again, I get such a CGI headache, especially with the Transformers movies, that like for me, it didn't have to be filmed anywhere near Chicago because it all looks completely fake anyway.
And then, in the 80s, we had another wave of wonderful films that came out as well, and I remember when they were shooting Wildcats with Goldie Hawn. I went to the audition for an extra and actually got the part to play an extra that had to pretend she was cold, and it was like 96 degrees outside.
You ugly! Your mama said you ugly! U-G-L-Y, and you ain't got no alibi! You ugly! What? You ugly!
I was here wearing a winter jacket, a hat, scarf, gloves, with my sister, and it was like 98 degrees, and we had to pretend it was cold and shivering, but it was cool because I got a chance to meet Goldie Hawn.
It's always a struggle for the state government to be convinced that offering film production companies tax incentives and tax breaks to come and bring their projects here. It's hard for those to get re-upped in the state budgets, because a lot of people are not convinced that offering people that kind of discount is actually good for the tax base. They're not necessarily convinced that the money that a film crew will spend on hotels and meals and hiring local people is really worth the breaks they're offering. But I mean, I'm prejudiced because I'm a film critic. I want to see that activity. I think Chicago is just great on camera. It's a photogenic city. And again, it's not one kind of city. It's a million kinds of cities all sharing the same space. So I think because it doesn't feel fished out yet, and I think people have a harder time filming in New York just because I think there's a little more permitting process and a little more expense to go through. It's always going to be more economical to shoot here rather than New York. The question is, can you convince a film crew of any size to film here as opposed to places like Albuquerque and New Orleans?
Films, some of the most recent films that have been shot here are the most, the ones that are mainstream right now is Divergent, Transformers. I believe the Jupiter Ascending with Mila Kunis was also shot in here in Chicago. So there's a ton of films that we really don't know about. But if you actually look it up, there's a whole array of list of films that, like, wow, I didn't know that was shot. North by Northwest, that was another one. An Alfred Hitchcock movie, right? That was shot on LaSalle.
We've got a pretty healthy amount of feature film and television activity here because we've got
A beautiful city with a lot of richness.
the studio space that can attract a series and really get people sort of thinking seriously about, okay, is it competitively priced? Can we film in Chicago? And mainly, and this is the main thing, does it offer an interesting variety of locations? And the answer is yes, because it looks like a great American city and you can kind of make it look any way you want.
Some of that history, old history of Chicago that comes along with it. So, you know, when you attach a film to say it was shot here in Chicago, it adds that little extra value to it where people actually want to, oh, I want to check it out. It was shot in Chicago.